My husband of 12 years hid from me that he was adopted and that he has a biological family that had been looking for him. I found out because my daughter found photos on his phone. What happened when I confronted him changed what I thought I knew about 12 years of marriage. There are secrets people carry not because they want to harm those around them, but because the secret arrived before the relationship. Because it settled somewhere so deep that over time it stopped feeling like something that could be taken out and shown without everything built on top of it also moving. My husband carried a secret of that kind for 12 years of marriage. He did not carry it because he did not love me. He carried it because he had learned to carry it alone long before I existed in his life. And that distinction, which took me time to understand, was what determined what happened afterward. What I found when my 7-year-old daughter showed me photos of people she did not recognize on her father's phone was the beginning of the most important and most difficult conversation of 12 years together. My name is Valeria. I am 42 years old. I am a high school teacher. I have been married for 12 years to a man named Fernando who is 44, who is a hydraulic engineer, and who is the father of my 3 children. Emilio, who is 11, Sophia, who is 9, and Lucia, who is 7. Fernando is the kind of person people describe as solid. Not in the boring sense of the word, in the sense that when he is somewhere, that place feels more stable. Present, consistent, the kind of father and husband who does what he says he is going to do, and who, when he cannot, says so in advance. 12 years, without a lie I knew of, without a secret I could have detected, until the Saturday afternoon when Lucia came running to where I was with her father's phone in her hand, asking me who the people in the photos were and whether they were our family, because the woman in one photo looked a lot like Daddy. Fernando was in the yard. Lucia had found me in the kitchen. I told her to ask her father and to give him back his phone. But before she returned it, I saw the photos. 4 images. A woman of approximately 40 years old with Fernando's eyes and jaw structure in a way that was not coincidence. An older man with the same profile. A group photo of what appeared to be a family at a gathering. A screenshot of a message conversation where the saved name was Marcela's sister, and the last visible message said they had received the photos and that everyone was very happy to hear from him. Marcela's sister. Fernando did not have sisters. Fernando did not have family. Fernando was an only child whose parents had died when he was 22 years old before I met him. That was what I knew. I gave the phone back to Lucia. I told her they were friends of Daddy's and to return it to him. Lucia ran out. I stayed in the kitchen with the feeling of someone who has just seen something they cannot unsee and who needs a moment to decide what to do with it. That moment lasted until the night when the children were asleep. When all 3 children were in their rooms, I told Fernando we needed to talk. He asked about what. I told him Lucia had shown me photos on his phone this afternoon. Fernando said nothing for several seconds. And the way he said nothing told me more than anything he could have said. It was not the reaction of someone who does not know what you're talking about. It was the reaction of someone who knows exactly what you're talking about and who is processing that the moment they somewhere knew was going to arrive has finally arrived. What Fernando told me that night, I'm going to tell in the way I received it, with the attention of someone who is hearing something that reorganizes not an event, but a complete history. Fernando had been adopted at 4 months old. His adoptive parents, whom he had loved deeply and who had died when he was 22 years old, had been his parents in every sense that mattered to him. He had known since he was young. It had not been a secret from his childhood. But when his parents died, the only connection to the story of his adoption died with them. Fernando had made the decision, at 22, not to search for his biological family. Not because he rejected them, but because in that moment of grief, what he needed was to close, not to open. And that decision to close he had sustained for 20 years, including the 12 we had been together, including the moment when he had told me he was an only child of deceased parents, which was true in the way he lived it, even though it was not the whole truth. 2 years ago, his biological family had found him through an adoptee registry. His sister Marcela had been the one who made first contact. Fernando had responded. And since then, they had had a relationship that had grown slowly through messages without him having known how to tell me. I asked him why he had not told me. Not with anger yet, with a genuine question of someone who needs to understand before reacting. He told me several things I'm going to recount in the order he said them because the order matters. First, he told me he had not told me at the beginning of our relationship because it was something he had been carrying since before he met me and that he did not know how to introduce into a new relationship. Then he told me that as the relationship became more serious and more permanent, it had become increasingly difficult to say it because it also meant explaining why he had not said it before. Then he told me that when Marcela had contacted him 2 years ago, he had panicked. Not because he did not want to meet his biological family, but because opening that door also meant opening the conversation with me that he had not had in 12 years, and that he had not known how to have that conversation. That every time he had tried to find the moment, there had never been the right moment. That the silence had been getting heavier with each week that passed without saying it. I listened to him say all of that. And when he finished, I told him something that in that moment was true, even though it was also insufficient to contain everything I felt. I told him I understood that the secret had started before me, and that I understood that carrying something like that for 20 years produced an inertia that was hard to interrupt. And that at the same time, 12 years of marriage with 3 children and a completely shared life gave me the right to have known this. Not because I needed to control his history, but because his history is part of our family's history. That our children have biological grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins who exist and who do not know they exist. That was not only his secret. It was a secret that carried my name and our children's names without us having chosen it. Fernando cried, not performatively, in the way someone cries who has carried something for a long time and who, when they finally let it go, understands in their body how heavy it was. He told me I was right, that there was no way to justify 12 years of silence that was not fear, that he had been afraid I would see him differently, that our history would reorganize in a way he could not control, that the children would have questions he would not know how to answer. I told him those fears were understandable, and that acting from those fears for 12 years without asking me whether my real response would have been what he feared was the decision that could not go unnamed. The weeks that followed were a process Fernando and I navigated with the help of a couples therapist we started seeing 10 days after that conversation. Not because the relationship was broken, but because what we had opened that night was too much to process alone and too important to process poorly. The therapist helped us separate the layers. The adoption layer, Fernando's story, what it had meant for him, what he had carried, what he needed to be able to open it with the biological family in a way that was his and not a response to the accidental discovery. The secret layer, what it had meant for me to find out this way. What reorganized in the history I thought I had of our relationship. What I needed from Fernando to be able to trust differently going forward. The children layer, when and how to tell them. What language to use. How to introduce people who existed and who were family without the revelation generating more confusion than clarity. I met Marcela 4 months after that night. Fernando had been preparing her. I had been preparing myself. It was an afternoon at a cafe. Marcela arrived with the nervous energy of someone who has spent 2 years building a relationship with her brother through messages and who is finally going to meet the family he built. She looked at me in a way that told me Fernando had talked to her about me, and the way he had done it, which I could infer from how she received me, told me that what Fernando had said about me was good and was honest. That mattered, more than I expected it to matter. Emilio, Sophia, and Lucia met their paternal biological family 2 months later. With a prior conversation Fernando and I had prepared with the therapist. With the language that Daddy had discovered, he had family he did not know he had, and that this family wanted to meet them. Without drama. Without the weight of adult secrets deposited on the shoulders of children. Lucia, who had been the one who had found the photos without knowing what she was finding, told Marcela at that first meeting that she looked a lot like her daddy. Marcela told her it was because they were family. Lucia said okay and kept playing. The simplicity of children in the face of what adults complicate for years. 8 months have passed since that night in the kitchen. Fernando and I are still together. Not because the secret went without consequences, But because what followed the discovery was a process where Fernando did something that determined everything that came after, he did not minimize, did not look for additional justifications, did not deposit the responsibility on the accident of the discovery. He owned what he had done, with the honesty of someone who understands that owning does not undo the harm, but is the only foundation from which something different can be built. And I did something that was also difficult. Separate the pain about the secret from the understanding of why the secret existed. Both things could be true at the same time. The secret had caused real harm, and the man who had carried it was not a man who had wanted to cause me harm. He was a man who had not known how to interrupt something that had started long before me. Holding both of those truths at the same time was the hardest and most necessary part of the entire process. What I want you to take from his story has two parts. The first is for whoever recognizes themselves in Fernando's position. The secrets we carry before the important relationships of our lives do not disappear because we do not say them. They settle into the relationship as a presence that has no name, but that takes up space. And the space they take up grows with every year that passes without being named. There is a moment in any important relationship where the cost of saying something is less than the cost of continuing without saying it. That moment almost always passes more quickly than we think. And when we let it pass, the next moment is harder and the next one harder still. The fear of the reaction of the person we love is understandable. But acting from that fear for years without giving that person the opportunity to show that their real response could have been different from what we feared is also a form of not trusting them. And that also has consequences. The second part is for whoever recognizes themselves in Valeria's position. When what you discover about someone you love is not a betrayal, but a fear that became increasingly difficult to interrupt, the question you have to ask yourself is not whether to forgive. It is whether the person in front of you is the same person you thought you were with, or whether the new information shows you someone different. In my case, the new information showed me someone with more history than I knew. Not someone different, someone more complete. And that distinction was what determined everything that came after. If this story reached you, comment. Do you believe there are secrets that can be carried in a relationship without being a betrayal, or is every important secret a betrayal? Like if you believe adoption stories deserve more space and more compassion than they generally receive. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who is navigating something difficult to tell in a relationship that matters. Reflection to take with you. The right moment to say something difficult in a relationship that matters almost never exists spontaneously. It has to be created, and creating it will always cost less than the accumulated cost of every year that passes without having created it.